L.A. Noire. Not a name that's spoken too much anymore. I heard about it a lot when I was just a tyke, but I never got the chance to experience it. But now, I'm older, and there's no GameStop worker trying to gatekeep games by telling my mom stuff about the game that she should absolutely be aware of. So, after all these years, we'll see if this game still holds up, and more importantly, is it worth it? Now the first thing I have to cover is L.A. Noire is a Rockstar game. The version I played was the remaster that's available on Steam. And if you have ever played a Rockstar game on PC, I'm sure you know all about the Rockstar launcher. And boy, do I especially know about the Rockstar launcher. But if you've had the pleasure of not using this launcher before, I will give you a brief description of the universal experience of using the Rockstar launcher. It's fucking dog shit. Allow me to do a brief reading of the negative reviews on the L.A. Noire Steam store page. I don't recommend playing L.A. Noire on PC because you have to install and make an account for Rockstar's own launcher to even play it. The game itself is great, one of the most horrible games to start or launch. Whose wonderful idea was it to put a launcher in a launcher with more accounts needed? Why the hell do I need a Rockstar social club to play this? This is not a rant against the game, but of the Rockstar Games launcher. Rockstar launcher sucks. Other than that, the game is nice. Doesn't let me play because I can't sign it. You get the point. My personal experience with it is I couldn't log into Rockstar for literal years because it uses the dog shit Google Authenticator 2-factor authenticator bullshit which never gave me the right code to log in, and no matter how much I emailed, called, contemplated suicide, I was never able to log in. I just remembered this as I'm editing this video. Part of the reason I couldn't log in was because I couldn't verify to the support team. It was me, the account owner, trying to recover my account because I could not provide them a government issued ID because I was like 14 at the time, which might sound reasonable, but how the fuck would my ID let them know I was the account owner? The only things connected were my email and phone number. And guess what two things I had access to? But for some reason, I had to provide a government issued ID that in no way could possibly indicate that a fucking Rockstar account was mine. After giving up for a while, which was years, I just came back one day and it just let me log in. Okay, I know I'm interrupting again, but this isn't even a bit. I was going to record and show that I can access the Rockstar launcher, but I literally can't. It logged me out and the bullshit Google Authenticator doesn't fucking work right again, so I can't put in the goddamn code to access my fucking account, so I have to talk to the bitch ass Rockstar support again, and then if I get access to my account, I still have to use the fucking Google Authenticator. So the fact that this game uses the Rockstar launcher, it already knocks it down a few points. Now onto the actual game. L.A. Noire takes place in 1947 Los Angeles and follows our main man, Cole Phelps. Cole Phelps was a Marine that fought in World War II and was considered a war hero indefinitely. Never committed any war crimes ever. After the war, Phelps came back to LA and became a police officer where he very quickly rose through the ranks to become a detective, and with his no-nonsense attitude and incredible detective skills is able to tackle some of the toughest cases the city has ever seen. Alright, now that I've read the back of the game case, let's get into the gameplay. This game can be split into two main parts, point and click and the dating sim. Let's start with the point and click as it is how most of the game is played. Now, despite my previous statement, the game isn't actually just a point and click game. Ignore that. The gameplay in the non-dating sim parts boils down to you and your partner arriving at a crime scene where someone gives you a quick rundown on what's going on. Then, even though you're supposed to be the new guy and your partner's supposed to be showing you the ropes, you do all the investigating, while your partner just stands there and says something dumb.
Cheer up, fatso. We're gonna let you go on squeezing these poor saps a little while longer. Well, until some commie union types infiltrate this place.
Fuck unions.
Funny.
We need you to answer some questions, John.
If you don't mind, I prefer Ferdinand.
Don't push your luck, knucklehead.
Racist.
Since when have the police cared about dead black men?
Good point. We don't.
Or sexist.
Ha! Phelps, you jump like a girl.
And quick side note, these characters are a little too good at being racist. I may have some questions for the writers, but I'll get to that later. Anyway, the main part of investigating crime scenes is just walking around them until you hear this musical cue. When you hear that cue, it means you found an item that you can interact with that 9 times out of 10 is irrelevant.
I think this is going to help us.
When you do find something you can interact with that's actually evidence, it's usually a dead naked lady.
Blood. Oh, fuck!
Phelps picks it up and you have to finagle the item around until the game decides that it is actually evidence. And getting the game to accept that it is evidence is kind of annoying, which now may be a good time to bring up the controls. The controls are kind of butt-ass. They're not so bad that it detracts from the overall gaming experience, but if you can imagine an Xbox 360 game from 2011, the controls can be a little clunky. Shooting and moving around actually feels pretty good most of the time, but when you are expecting an item or driving, the clunkiness is very apparent. For the record, I did not play on a controller, so I can't say for sure if the clunkiness was just because I was using a keyboard and mouse, but I have a feeling that using a controller wouldn't have been much of an improvement. Anyways, it's kind of hard to put into words why investigating an item feels so clunky. It just feels like Phelps doesn't move how you'd expect him to, it feels delayed, but also sensitive, and sometimes he tries to lock onto the part of the item that is important, but it just makes it worse because of the delayed movement and sensitivity. I guess I did just put it into words. Man, who wrote this script? As I said before, I don't think this detracts from the game, but it can be annoying. However, with the driving, that's totally different. If you've played GTA 4 before, the driving is very similar to that, but a little less responsive. I haven't played GTA 4 in over a decade, so I could just be smoking weed. This is just from what I remember the game being like. But if you haven't played GTA 4, the best way I can describe how it feels to drive is like you're constantly driving on ice. So L.A. Noire is like that, but with like your tire shot out or something. Thankfully, most of the time you can have your partner drive, which acts as the game's fast travel mechanics, so you don't have to experience the driving a lot. To tie this back to the gameplay, there are sections where you are required to drive. Most of these sections are car chases where you chase the suspect in a car, who would have guessed. And while these parts can be exciting, they can also be a little frustrating. Every car chase is your partner yelling at you to drive better so they can shoot out the suspect's tires.
Phelps, you gotta get me closer!
While you're trying to come in from the side to do like a pit maneuver on their car in a way that would definitely instantly kill them. But with the clunky driving combined with the suspect's almost perfect driving at times, it can be difficult to catch them. To add to that, there will be random NPCs that just run into you and fuck you over. And when you do fail a chase, it restarts the beginning like you'd expect, but there is always a cutscene before any of the chases start, and the game forces you to watch them again. Despite all that, I think they did a good job here. It's like they knew that the driving wasn't all that, so they cover it up with an exciting chase scene and funny dialogue, which I think works. But there is a different scenario where you are forced to drive, and that is when you're tailing someone. And holy shit, I hated these parts. It's not even necessarily the clunky driving, it's more so that it's a stealth mission that is very easy to fail, so you have to constantly restart, but you have to watch a cutscene every time you fail. I did find out later that you can just skip these, which was nice because playing them out doesn't give you any additional context or dialogue. They're there mostly to fill time. That was a long car rant. But to go back to the crime scene portion of the game, after you find all the evidence at the scene, there's usually a person that you have to question. And where we move into the aspect of the game that made it famous at the time, the interrogations. In this portion of the game, you start asking questions, and based on the evidence you have gathered and the facial expressions of the person you are questioning, you have to deduce if the person is telling the truth, doubting, which is when they're not giving the full truth, or lying. Back in 2011, these interrogation sections were kind of considered the next step in gaming, as nothing like this had ever been done before. As Brendan McNamara, the game's director and writer, said, "For a long time we've been able to make buildings that look good, we've been able to make cars that look very real, but not drive good. But with the previous technologies that you'd use on facial motion capture, we didn't feel we could pull that off. Could never really tell if someone was lying or not." This shit was pretty much Avatar, but it's about racist cops. For the facial motion capture, they used a brand new technology called motion scan. And to summarize this technology, it was basically a bunch of cameras placed at various angles, filming the actor's face at a high frame rate, where they would then take that footage and convert it to the 3D models we see in the game. Did I say actors? Yeah, everyone you interact with in this game is an actual person. And all the movements like walking, character interaction, and picking up objects, that's all real. They motion captured all of that. I wasn't joking comparing this to Avatar. It is very similar to what that movie did, and it's truly impressive. Alright, for real, back to the gameplay. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty bad at the interrogations. If someone isn't blatantly lying, like literally 5 seconds ago I found a piece of evidence that contradicts what they just said, I feel like I am just guessing. Catching someone's lie is usually the easiest option because if you accuse someone of lying, you then have to present evidence. So it's either you have the evidence that proves they're lying or you don't. But sometimes it doesn't feel true. There were a lot of times where I would accuse someone of lying because they were, and then present evidence that I thought for sure was the correct choice. But then I hear this goddamn musical cue. I then find out later I either had to choose doubt or I just presented the wrong evidence. So a lot of the time, it felt like I was just flipping a three-sided coin and just hoped I chose the correct answer. Now, I still thought these sections were incredibly well done. The character interactions are one of the main draws of the game. I was just personally bad at them. Luckily for me, even if you are a bad detective, you can still get through the game without it detracting from the story. And there is a built-in feature to help you out in these interrogations. You can gain XP in this game by finding evidence, stopping street crimes, and doing well in interrogations. And when you get enough XP, you rank up. Ranking up gives you new outfits and other stuff, but more importantly, it gives you intuition points, where when you are in an interrogation, you can remove an answer or see what the community chose. Sometimes it's not that helpful. But after repeating the loop of going to a location, finding evidence, questioning someone like 3 times, there's one final part to the gameplay, and that is the conviction. After you interrogate the suspects, there's usually 2, you have to choose who you want to go to jail. Now, this is slight spoilers for the game, but whoever you end up choosing doesn't matter. It has no bearing on the story. The only thing it changes is the dialogue at the end of the case, which is kind of a letdown because it gives you the feeling that whatever you do doesn't really matter. At least sometimes at the end of the case, you just skip the conviction part and you just execute them in the streets. Or something else happens. It depends on the case. But yeah, that's pretty much the gameplay. Looking for clues at various locations, absolutely grilling random people, executing people in the street, and locking up someone who probably didn't do it. Now, let's get to the meat and potatoes. The story. Or should I say, the spam and potatoes. you get it? Because the war where Phelps definitely didn't commit any war crimes, like ever. I gave you the cliff notes earlier. Phelps is an ex-Marine who fought in World War II, became a cop, then became a detective. Now, as you might guess about a single-player story-based game, the story is one of the main reasons to play the game. I don't want to discuss the story too heavily, as I want to avoid any major spoilers in case anyone has yet to play it, but I will still discuss the general story. The story is broken into 5 parts: patrol, traffic, homicide, vice, and arson. The first part, patrol, follows our main character Phelps as he starts settling into his position as a patrolman for the LAPD. Despite most of this section being Phelps overstepping his boundaries as a patrolman, from conducting his own investigations on evidence he didn't turn in, breaking into a man's home, and then beating that man, he performs a lot of police brutality, by the way. At the end of this section, Phelps is approached by Donnelly, who is the captain of the homicide department. He asks Phelps to do the interrogation on this most recent case because he's such a damn good cop. After failing to make this guy confess the first time,
You disappoint me, Cole Phelps. Get back in there and raise some lumps, boy! I need a confession!
you go back in and you get that confession.
Masterfully done, Officer Phelps.
And when you come out, Donnelly tells you you have been promoted to a traffic detective, where you investigate crimes dealing with cars. And that's where patrol ends. Now I'm gonna be real, the next 3 sections, traffic, homicide, and vice, are all kind of the same. You and your partner arrive at the crime scene, look around, talk to people, and it ends with you either executing someone in the streets or sending them to jail. Then Donnelly comes up to you and says something like, "Good job executing that guy in the streets. You have given the city the retribution it deserves. You've now been promoted to super cop, boyo." He says boyo often.
Boyo.
Now, each of these sections have their own overarching stories that unravel as you play through them, and there are other little details within each section that tie all of them together, like you know how a story works. So that's why it's kind of hard to talk about this story without giving too much away, as the story is presented by giving little clues throughout the whole case, and then there's like a big twist at the end. But the final part, arson, has a different vibe. At the end of Vice, instead of getting praised for breaking the law, you actually get punished because you cheated on your wife.
You'll be formally charged with adultery.
And apparently, cheating on your wife is a crime, and all these 1940s white men seem to really care about it. Hey, I'm just gonna cut in here real quick. That last statement kind of made it sound like I said Phelps cheating on his wife isn't a bad thing. I'm very anti-cheating on your wife. I was just pointing out that I didn't know and was surprised that cheating on your partner was an officially recognized crime. Oh, sorry, it's because this woman is German.
How could you do it, lad? Your wife, your children, consorting with the enemy and a dope fiend at that. You're lucky the war is over. You'd be taken out and shot.
And that whole World War II thing happened, and that's actually the only reason why they care. But yeah, Phelps gets like suspended or something because criminals can't be cops.
A criminal cannot serve as an LAPD officer.
But he's back like the next day, and he got demoted to arson cases, where he sees horrifying things.
There's very little evidence.
Oh my fucking...
Evidence!
He then, despite everyone telling him to chill out, tries to prove a huge conspiracy about a home development company setting their own buildings on fire and scamming insurance to, I guess, distract everyone from the fact that he cheated on his wife so he can get promoted again. I'm just gonna stop with the story there because it's now time to get to the juicy part. The things I disliked about the game. Let's start with the story as I just talked about it. I don't really have a problem with the story itself, more so the way the story is presented. One problem I have is that part of the story is optional. There are these newspapers that can be occasionally found at crime scenes that at first I thought were just fun, unrelated stories, so I stopped collecting them after the first one because I didn't want to sit through a long cutscene about a story that's unrelated. But turns out those stories are very related. In the main game, they reference people and events that happen in those newspapers, which led to a lot of confusion later on in the story because I didn't watch the newspaper cutscenes. Add to that, in the middle of gameplay, you'll just get flashbacks to Phelps' times in war, which I didn't really pay attention to either. And you might say bro is getting confused about the story but didn't watch the cutscenes, but that's part of the problem. The cutscenes weren't engaging. The newspaper cutscenes were of people I didn't know just talking about stuff I thought was unrelated because the things they talked about hadn't yet affected the story. I think a different way it could have been presented could be like you're driving to a crime scene and your partner says, "Did you read the paper this morning?" Then he tells you the headline and it goes into the cutscene. Then it makes it very clear that the crime you're about to investigate is somehow connected to the newspaper. And this way, you wouldn't miss any of the newspaper cutscenes, so you get all the context. And with the war ones, they just need to be more concise. I want to learn about Phelps. I want to know his part in the war and how it affected him. But with the very first flashback being him and his buddies getting yelled at for 2 minutes for having the wrong bus, it's not engaging. The way these cutscenes are presented make the story more confusing instead of enriching it. And to make the confusion worse, there are a lot of characters. Maybe I have a small brain, or maybe I'm just racist, but it's hard for me to remember all these white men and their backstories, so keeping track of all the characters and storylines is difficult. Now my next problem is the writing. I don't actually have a problem with all the racism and sexism and all that because it's time appropriate, and the game being set in the 40s, those things would play a role in a police investigation. So McNamara, you get away with racism this time. But I am surprised that no white man said the hard R during the entire game that I can remember. But they kind of went hard on Hispanic people. I think this game was one of the only times ever I felt somewhat offended by the way someone said a slur. They really let Hispanic people have it sometimes. All jokes aside, I do have a slight problem with the writing. The characters use a lot of slang. And I know I just said racism is fine because it's the 40s, but when characters use slang that doesn't exist in the modern day, it can be hard to follow what they are talking about. There were some points where I had no idea what the fuck they were talking about, and I had to Google some of the words they were saying. I feel like I'm going to become the Joker because I have scoured for hours through 25 plus hours of footage looking for the moment when I Googled on stream the slang they were using because I literally didn't understand what they were saying, and also looked for the moment of me being offended when someone said a slur against Mexican people. I can usually find the exact clips I'm looking for when editing a video, and if I can't, I can find some sort of substitution from either recreating it or finding a similar clip online. But I just can't this time, and it's driving me crazy. I usually have some sort of idea of either which stream the clip I'm looking for is from, or I remember enough details that can eventually lead me to finding it. But this time, I'm losing it. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just have to get this off my chest to let you know I did try to find the appropriate clips, but I just can't. This is what I get for procrastinating so much, because I finished this game back in October 2023, and me recording this voiceover right now, I'm like only 60% of the way done with this video, and it's January 2nd, 2024. So I am sorry I can't give you the examples of the whack-ass dialogue that I've talked about, but trust me, they are there. With all that being said, it's time for the final review. Despite my issues with how the story is presented sometimes, the language used, the driving, and the whole it doesn't matter who you sent to jail, I don't really have other complaints. There are things I could nitpick from a modern point of view, but when I play games that are older, my brain kind of factory resets to that Xbox 360 era mindset. So I let a lot of things slide that I normally wouldn't with modern games. However, even if I did consider a lot of the common issues with older games, I don't think it would affect my view of this game too much. So, is this decade-old game about racist cops worth it? Yes! Who would have guessed this critically acclaimed game that I've been praising throughout this entire video is a game I would recommend? I don't really know what to say about it either. I just like it. I like the story, I like the over-the-top characters, I like how goofy this game can be, I like that it feels like an Xbox 360 game. It's very campy, and I like that. But I would suggest if you are interested in this game, don't buy it for $20, wait for a sale, or better yet, buy like a used copy for a console because it's over a decade old now, and fuck Rockstar for making me use their shitty ass launcher. Also because we got Christmas Ducks on before GTA 6, 8 out of 10, it's good. Hey, sorry it took so long to get this video out. I know it's been a while since I put out a real video, I guess, because The Trackmania one was December 16th, but this video was hard to work on. I kept changing the script because I didn't like it, it just didn't sound good. It was the holiday season, and these types of videos just take a while to make too, and I think that's enough excuses to get me out of this. but seriously, thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and thank you all so much for the support recently. Hitting 1K before the end of the year was just crazy. But now, let's hit 1 million before the end of the month. Remember to like and subscribe, baby!